guys, and welcome back to this special archived episode of
Pardon Our Honesty.
I'm Tiffany.
I'm Megan.
And today we are deep diving into a sensitive subject most ladies never talk about, and it's called baby blues or postpartum depression. We deep dive into this conversation with Jen and Amanda, and it's no holds barred. So get a cup of coffee, sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. We're super excited about today's topic. So before we get into it, the premise of our show is basically we take a taboo topic and we unpack it. We talk about it openly and honestly. And today we got special guests, so they're going to help us talk about this topic. But before we do that, we're going to let them introduce themselves and give us a little bit information about them. And then we'll get into it, guys.
Amanda.
Hi, I'm Amanda. I live in Northwest Indiana with my son. He is almost 2. He'll be 2 in April. Work as a surgical first assist by day and mom the rest of the time. I'm in school right now to get my bachelor's degree, and that's life.
You got a lot going on.
You got a lot going on.
Hi, I'm Jen. I'm an associate professor of criminology, criminal justice, and legal. Long title. At Grand Valley State University in Michigan, in Grand Rapids. I live with my just 5-year-old son, Boone, and my husband, Dale, and my 14-year-old geriatric angel of a dog, Roosevelt.
Today's topic, guys, is something that I don't think I've ever had a conversation about. It's postpartum depression. That's when I had kids because I had a shit show of life and had nothing to do with babies. So I'm going to let y'all be the experts today. Yep. And kind of start this off. Postpartum, they call it baby blues. And I guess it's just a period of you're just not unhappy. What did you guys experience?
Yeah, well, I guess what our first question would be is, how did you know something was, and Jen, if you want to start, and then we'll just switch back and forth.
And I'm going to get emotional throughout this whole entire thing. Yes. So I didn't even have a game plan, right? Like, I am a social scientist. Everything in my life is planned. I mean, to conceive my son, I had to use fertility. Like, I just assumed I could breastfeed, didn't even buy bottles. I had no birth plan. I was like, I'm just going to wing it. I'm always going to want to hold him. And I had Boone. I was in labor for like a day and a half, ended up having a really, really traumatic C-section. Both of us almost actually died. And I remember being at home, and it's interesting in hindsight. Like, I was thinking about this yesterday before this, like, looking back, I can so clearly see how I was off, but in the midst of it, it was very different. Didn't feel an immediate connection to my son. Like, I knew that I loved him. I knew that desperately. But everyone around me talked about, like, oh my gosh, it's the happiest moment of your life. You're going to feel rainbows and sunshine and butterfly. And I just didn't have that. And I came home, and again, my university offers maternity leave, but you have to be there for a whole year. I started the job pregnant. And so I actually wrote an article about motherhood in academia. And so I was emailing students from the hospital, right? So I got home, and my husband was working outside of the home, and I'm like, all my classes are online. I'll do the midnight shift. Boone was colicky, so he would cry like 15, 18 hours a day. And I remember just like feeling like I shouldn't feel this way. And for me, it wasn't so much depression as it was anxiety. And I've never had anxiety in my life. And it was like I couldn't sleep because I was convinced he would need something and I wouldn't know how to do it for him. And I was miserable. There's no other way to describe that. I was exhausted. I was miserable. I would Google, like, is it normal to feel this way? What are the baby blues? How long do they last? What can I do to make myself feel better? And this was in 2018, so we're not talking about 60 years ago. All the videos that you watch at the hospital about how to breastfeed and breastfeeding's best, like, no one told me this could happen. Right? No one told me that it was a possibility to feel this way. So I reached out to I'll try to get rid of that glare. I reached out to my mentor from grad school. She'd had kids a little bit later in life. And I'm like, Angie, something is wrong. Like, this is not, I know that this isn't how I should be feeling. And so the only reason I knew, like everyone around me knew something was off, right? But it was reaching out to women who had experienced it and were like, you know, this is probably what you're feeling. I mean, it literally took other people telling me that this, not only was it okay, like, but that it was common, because no one warned me. Like, no one warned me.
Now, you said you reached out to, you know, a mentor of yours. Did you talk to your husband about it, or did you feel like embarrassed not to say something, or that you were like...
Yes and yes. So it is still, first of all, I have the most supportive partner in the world. I cannot emphasize that enough. Dale he's just the coolest person alive. But we still joke about this, because in the height of it, when Boone was so colicky, I was trying to work, I was going through postpartum anxiety, and I knew something was wrong. But you're afraid because, like, you know, I had to get on fertility to have Boone. I had everything I ever wanted in my life, and I was miserable. And so there was shame in that. But I remember one time he came home, and he had said, because, I mean, he didn't know it too. He's like, "What is wrong with you, Jen?" And that was such a trigger. Like, the feminist thing came out.
Right.
I was like, "What the fuck do you mean? What's wrong with me?" And
You can say the F word, it's okay.
I was like, "You're fucking crazy. Like, how dare you come at me that way?" And I'm like, "How about you stay up in the middle of the night?" I mean, it was just, and so it was, I told him, but it's one of those things that, this has just been my experience. If you haven't went through it, it is very hard to communicate about it. And like, my mom's fantastic, one of my best friends, but I remember like months before I had Boone, her saying, and Mom, if you watch this, I love you and I know you didn't mean it, but like, well, you know, we didn't have postpartum back in my day. I think women just talk about it and then they feel like they create it. And then she saw me go through it. And, you know, I've always been the type of person, like, I mean, I picked up and moved to Costa Rica. Like, I've done research in Rwanda. I've moved around. I've done all kinds of things with my life. And, like, nothing really had fazed me. And all of a sudden, I had this, you know, 10-pound meatloaf that just completely just rocked my world. But I think pretty early on, I realized that, like, oh, I'm not feeling all the warm, glowy stuff that appears that all the women around me are feeling. What I find out is that so many women just, they fake it, you know, just an insane time to begin with. But that's how I knew, is that I know my own body well enough. And then reaching out, one of my friends, her name is Carrie Wishmeyer, Melima now, she's married. And she and I went to high school together, and she was a couple years younger than me. And she's had 2 girls. And I remember posting something on social, like after I kind of Boone was probably 6-8 weeks old before I finally went to my doctor, and just reaching out to Carrie, the woman who I thought, you know, those women that fashionable and they're hilarious. And even though she was younger than me, Carrie's like the coolest person alive. And I mean, Carrie telling me, like, she had it horrible with both girls. She did this this program that is offered at a mental health facility here in Grand Rapids. Out, you know, you bring your girls, it's kind of helping you like process through it. And she was so open and so transparent about it, that it made me be like, okay, so there isn't shame. And that's something that has taken me, Amanda, I don't know if you experience this, but like years with my therapist to get past the shame of having postpartum. So
now, Amanda, feel free to share what you want to or not want to about what you went through. But if you want to share a little bit about kind of your history and what you've experienced.
Sure. So I have struggled with depression and anxiety for a better part of my life. Prior to getting pregnant, my husband abruptly passed away in December of 2020. He had a massive heart attack. It was very, very unforeseen. He was only 37, 38 at the time. And so obviously those months up prior to me getting pregnant were very, very low. I did a lot of therapy. I did a lot of work on myself, and I was actually starting to get to a good place. And I winded up getting pregnant one time, and there we are. So my
darn one time.
and my initial reaction to getting pregnant was I was not happy. I was in complete shock. I was terrified of what people would think of me because it was only 9 months after my husband passed away, and then having to explain of like, no, it's not my husband's, and yes, I'm still grieving, but yes, I'm also pregnant. So it was a lot. There was a lot of shame in that in the beginning. But again, I was still in therapy, and very quickly realized that the reason I didn't feel immediately happy or didn't feel joy and all those things was because I was worried about what the rest of the world would think. So once I processed that, I was over the moon. I was ecstatic. I knew I was going to be doing it on my own, that it was just going to be me. I knew that from the beginning. And I talked a lot with my therapist about it. And we talked about me being at a higher risk for postpartum depression and anxiety just because of everything I had gone through and was still going through and will continue to for the rest of my life. But I felt really prepared. I was excited. I couldn't wait for him to be born. And I had a very traumatic birth. He came out not breathing, so blue that he was black. He was limp. He didn't cry to me, it felt like hours. I'm not sure how long it really was. And at the same time, like, my spinal's wearing off and they're stabbing me in the leg with an injection because I'm hemorrhaging, and all of my medical knowledge is going through my head at the same time of, I know what's happening, or why isn't he crying? He needs to be crying. So it was a lot from the beginning. And then once we got home, he, like Jen's son, was very colicky. He cried 24/7. I realized that I had postpartum depression, anxiety once I would cry when he woke up. He didn't sleep often, but when he did, I would cry when he woke up. And I had a lot of anxiety during that time just because of our traumatic birth. And yes, they told me everything was fine, but I had some post-traumatic stress from losing my husband so abruptly and, looking at did I miss all these warning signs, and I should have known, and now I have this brand new baby. And so I'm just constantly worrying okay, is this wrong? Is that wrong? What am I doing wrong? But at the same time, why won't you sleep? So it was rocky in the beginning. I had a great support system. That's the one thing I was not shy in. The one thing that motherhood kind of instantly changed about me is anything that was going to help him and anything that will help him, nothing holds me back. So I was not afraid to call my mom and say, hey, I need help. I haven't slept in 36 hours. I haven't eaten, I'm feeling this way. And so I had friends that would come over at 2 a.m. because I called them and was like, listen, he won't stop crying, and I just need to walk around the block.
Yeah. Now, did you both feel guilty? Did you feel guilt? I know you mentioned shame, but did you feel guilty that it wasn't the rainbows and butterflies that you mentioned?
Extremely.
So how would you say you both dealt with that guilt?
I'm still dealing with it. I think I think about this often, and I think it absolutely shapes how I parent now. Like I said, I knew Megan when I lived in North Carolina, and I remember getting pregnant, and what had kind of happened is, in my situation, my husband and I were not interested in IVF, any of that, just because I'm I don't want to do all that. If we can't have children this way, we'll adopt, whatever. And so I was on the last possible round of Clomid I could take. And I took a pregnancy test in the morning, and it was negative. And so I'm having this moment of, okay, well, this is the end of kind of my biological journey to parenthood. So I went over to one of Megan and I's mutual friends, and I had a Bloody Mary and smoked me a cigarette. And I didn't smoke at that point because I'd been trying to get pregnant. And I went back to my house, and I'd left the pregnancy test on the counter from that morning. And I looked down, I'm like, shit, did I not give myself enough time? And so I flew to the Walmart in Sanford, Michigan. I'm one of those women, I bought 10 pregnancy tests, came home, and I had called my husband. We weren't married at that time, but I told him, I wasn't pregnant. And then I was like, oh my God, I actually am. And so I had so desperately wanted this baby. And I was at a university. I'd just gotten a job that was the absolute right fit for me. We were about 2 hours away from my parents, about 2 hours away from my husband's family. So we had no direct support here, but family was close enough. And, I was with the person that I knew from the moment I met him that I was supposed to be with. And so I literally had everything I ever wanted in my life, and I was miserable. And I remember looking at Boone and being so mad at myself that I, like, my sister-in-law had these lovely rosy experiences. So I thought, until she and I communicated a little bit. And I didn't have that. And I still feel so guilty. There are moments in my mind where I'm like, oh my God, did he feel that from me? Because my son is an empath, so he naturally picks up people's energy. And I'm like, oh my God, was his colic a result of me being in like this deep, dark place? Although after this, nothing phases me as a parent. Like, I very much kind of roll with the punches. Even now, and this sounds horrible, but like, there are times, like, every time I see a woman have this lovely birth, early child experience, I'm so happy for them, but I'm so immensely jealous that it burns me up for about a minute, because like, I couldn't get pregnant on my own. I didn't have the labor and delivery I wanted. I wasn't able to breastfeed. Like, biologically, it just didn't produce. And so it's like, I felt like my body had failed me in every situation. And then now here I have this baby, and now I'm failing myself. And so I processed through a lot of it, but I don't know if I will ever get rid of the shame, and that's all internal.
Amanda, do you feel the same way?
I in some sense, yeah. I later found out, through taking Ben to the doctor over and over again, the reason for the colicness, which he has GI issues, his gut was underdeveloped, he wasn't pooping ever at all. But I would take him in and I would say this, and they would say, "Are you a first-time mom?" And
yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, if one more person said that, I was going to fly through the roof. I'm like, yes, I am, but I also know that babies have to sometime in their life. But I would also, express like some of my concerns during that time, like he's crying a lot, I'm crying a lot, and, upright coming out and saying like, hi, like, I have postpartum depression. But the question of, are you a first-time mom, was the most infuriating thing to me.
Yeah, that sounds cool. Don't ask me that.
Yeah, like, it's just like, oh, you just don't know how to handle this. You're just not doing a good job. It's your first time. So that was really, really hard for me, because then I did wonder, like, is it something I'm doing? Am I, because I'm emotionally disheveled, is he feeling that? And so that's why he's crying too. And one thing, again, love my mother, my biggest supporter, but she would always say, like, well, when you're upset, he can read that.
Yeah,
so when he's upset, you can't get upset, or it's just going to make it worse. That was the most infuriating thing, because it's like, if I had control over this, I would
help it.
Right? I would be, happy and joyful, like every other mother you see, like, oh, I'm so happy. And I was happy. I was overwhelmed with love. And I think that's another part of it too, is you're so overwhelmed with, at least for me, I was so overwhelmed for love with him. Love that I didn't think I would ever feel. Love that I was afraid to feel again. Because I think I felt the more I loved him, the harder it could hurt. And so that was part of my, I think, wall.
What I find interesting about postpartum is, like, I feel like it's I didn't have postpartum, but I do know that when I had my daughter, I had a very hard time breastfeeding. And it was so hard, number one, to admit that to anybody, because it felt like you're less than a woman, or what are you doing wrong, or did you do this? And like, people weren't just like, girl, I know that's hard, try this, or try it. Like, just get in there and show me, right? And I would limit who I would say that to, or so I feel like, and I didn't have a support system. Nobody around me breastfed, so they just put her on a bottle. I'm like, well, I wanted to try this, and and all the inconveniences, because I feel like breastfeeding was an inconvenience. I had to cover up and hide and go in a car because I was not a public breastfeeder. But with postpartum, do you feel like, I know you did talk to some people, but at first, did you feel like, oh, I can't talk about this, people are going to judge me, or they're going to tell me it's not that, or like, did you feel like you had to be a superwoman because you're a mom now and you're a woman and you didn't want to look like you couldn't get your shit together, basically?
Absolutely.
Yeah, same. And to build on what you said, Megan, about breastfeeding, I think that ties in so carefully. I remember, and I could have smacked this lady in the face, a nurse. Again, I'm in Grand Rapids is a large area. Like, I'm not in some.
Yeah.
He walks into the room, and we have, fantastic hospital here. And, do you plan to bottle or breastfeed? And my plan, like, I didn't even buy, I just assumed that I would magically be able to breastfeed. So I told her, yeah, I plan. She's like, I knew I liked this room for a reason. There is so much shame for women who either can't breastfeed or simply choose not to. If you listen to women around you, even I will do it. Well, I tried, but it didn't work for me. It is no one's business.
Right.
And the shame that's associated with that. Like, I remember telling my doctor, and Boone and I have the same physician. Fantastic. And I remember telling him, I mean, we were in there every other day with a screaming colicky kid, and Boone had a little bit of reflux, but there were no, massive GI issues. It was a fourth trimester. He was a colicky ass kid. And I remember crying, and Megan knows me enough, like, I am an opinionated, loud, not emotional woman. I'm in this doctor's office, crying, and he's like, Jen, if you don't want to breastfeed, you don't have to. If you want to breastfeed, but you have determined that you getting rest is ultimately as important of a health choice as breastfeeding your baby, that is fine. He said, I got a medical degree. You have a PhD. Were you breastfed? He's like, either was I. He's like, are there absolutely health benefits to breastfeeding? Of course. But are there also incredible health benefits to mom being rested? And it always takes other people, I think for me, for my physician to be like, it's okay. And it wraps so into that shame of, well, I really wanted to, but I couldn't. Like, why do I even have to preface anything with that? It is no one's business. So absolute shame with that. And then on top of everything else, I mean, I've talked to quite a few women because I had women who were very vocal and honest about me. So I've really tried to be really intentional about friends, family, folks that I'm connected with on social media, being very honest about my story. I've had women, reach out to me, but I've never met a woman who's like, I'm not ashamed that I have postpartum. Have legit never met a woman who has ever said that. Right. And I think it is just so, I could go on about the patriarchy forever. I could go on about why there is so much shame associated with that. But I mean, I've never met anyone who, at least in the initial part of it, was not like, I feel like a bunch of shit, and I'm looking at this little human who I know I love desperately, but this is fucking awful and horrible, and whoever wants it. I don't know anyone who's like real free about having that convo.
Right. And I think the one thing I've learned as I've talked to people with postpartum who've suffered from that is that they feel guilty when they tell people they're not bonding with their kid. Mm-hmm. Like, I love you, but I'm not bonding. I don't feel close to you.
100%. My son was probably, and like I said, and again, this is part of the shame thing. I mean, I knew I found out I was pregnant, like, because we were trying, like, probably the day I got pregnant. I mean, I knew immediately how desperately I loved him. But to feel that and to feel bonded to him, which is probably why we're like peas and carrots now. Like, he's my tumor. And I mean that, like, not at all making fun of, I mean, he's grown into my body. I mean, he was probably 4 months old, I think, before I can remember the day where I'm like, this is how it feels.
Now, Amanda, did you have the same thing? Like, did it take you a while to feel like that bond? And if you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but did you also breastfeed or not breastfeed? And did you deal with stuff with that as well?
So I'll start with the breastfeeding thing. I knew right away that was not the choice for me, because of everything I had already been going through. I wasn't eating enough. I knew I was not going to be in any state to be able to eat enough for me and him. Now, obviously, when I was pregnant, I started protein shakes and my diet and this and that, but I knew, like, okay, once he gets here and it's just that's going to be a lot of pressure.
Yeah. And did you feel shame from that too? Did people give you, like, did that carry over to you?
So because of working in healthcare and being present, when the lactation consultant comes in and asks, the patient, like, oh, are you going to breastfeed? And they say no, and then they get the shame talk. I was already a big supporter, and everyone should do what is best for them, because that is ultimately what is going to be better for their baby. So I did not feel any shame in choosing to bottle feed. However, when Ben was born was during the national formula crisis. So maybe like a month or two down the road, which is too late, wish that I did breastfeed, only because I had family members traveling across state lines trying to find formula. And because of his GI issues, he had to be on a specific one.
Formula.
It was so expensive and I had a lot of anxiety in that too, which I think played a part in part of the anxiety. Was there were times when I had 1 can of formula left and had no idea where I was going to get more, because no store in a 50-mile radius had anything.
So you're saying that added to your stress of, hey, I have this baby, it's not, it's very colicky, and then I'm having to spend this extra money, and then I'm trying to be this superwoman mom, and
then I can't find the food.
Yeah,